tried XC, you tried fat bikes, didn't really get the growth, either the acceptance or the growth that you wanted and needed.
Yeah. Got us somewhere, but not far enough.
And then gravel bikes came around. It was kind of a godsend for you.
Yeah, it was. So at first, I mean, at that time I had like probably never like almost ridden a road bike or like a bike with drop bars. I mean, that just wasn't a big thing in Iceland. So we were mountain bikes in Iceland. So we weren't really there in our heads. But then like people kept like pointing out. I remember still meeting with like engineers from other bike companies. They were like, hey, what about like putting it on like cross bikes? Because there were no gravel bikes back then, but cyclocross. I remember also like one bike journalist that kept pointing out, hey, you should make a cross version of this. And we're like, I don't know. But then eventually, I mean, we got our minds there and like we started to realize, hey, okay. So, but at first we thought like we couldn't or wouldn't be able to scale it down enough sort of to fit in that like limited envelope. Like the fork length was going to be too short to fit our system into it, like a road bike fork length sort of. But then, so we did all those exercises, like scaled it down as much as we could. And at the same time, people were like scaling up their forks because like gravel bikes were being born sort of.
Right. So you went from cross with a max tire size of like 32, 33 to gravel, like 40, which was like 40, early days 40, right?
Yeah,
which was big, for
exactly,
what people were used to.
Exactly. So those bikes started to like come out, and then we're like, okay, this is
maybe
we could make this work. Okay, now we have like axle to crown, like was like sort of long enough. At that time, I have it in my head, there was like 395 was a common number like for the axle to crown. We needed like 405, 410 or something. So it was like, I mean, like change the geometry slightly, lift the bike a little bit, but it would be okay, sort of. So we sort of like, went into that because I mean, basically we were like almost like forced to. I mean, we knew we had something that worked. Yeah. We had to find the right application.
Downsizing cross country didn't, but maybe like upsizing your cross bike into a gravel bike.
That's always like a better sell, I think, to supersize things than to downsize. You don't go into McDonald's and they don't ask.
Yeah, they don't ask if you want to downsize
that meal. It's all about supersizing. So we made like the initial grit gravel fork, and that was like we put it a lot on like in those days it was like we consider like the pioneer, like one of the pioneers of like high-end gravel bikes, like the Open Up, for example, which was, I mean, there were like gravel bikes before it, but that was like they struck a slightly different like tone, sort of. It was the first bike for me that like made gravel like really high-end, a high-end sport.
Yeah, it went from kind of like this dirty cross thing and what Salsa was doing, which was great with the cutthroat and some of their early bikes.
Yeah.
To like, now here's this premium race bike.
Posh. They made it posh, sort of like, and then it became like, and this of course like coincides with like the birth of the gravel racing. Whenever you have racing, then people want like the ultimate tool for that job. And it doesn't, then you like go out of the like, to me, like slightly boring, like only practical stuff, like to put like racks and like panniers and like bags all over. Then you start to think about like speed and fun. So to me, the Open Up was that bike, and then they like those guys, Jared Ruman and Antti Kessler, followed up with the 3T Explorer. Then after that, and we were like our forks were like going. This initial gravel fork we made was going a lot on those bikes, and then
it was an option. They offered it as an option.
They even offered it as an option. We were buying it, and many others did as well. Like the small like boutique brands like all over the world were like we were like doing at the high point. I think we were doing like almost 2,000 forks a year.
Which I think getting that sort of like third party validation of like, hey, yes, we like this fork enough to offer it to our customers as an option, right?
Absolutely. That was a huge thing for us, that like these like respectable brands were willing to use this component from this like garage company like in Reykjavik, sort of. So that was huge for us, like that validation, absolutely. Outwards, sort of towards people, and just for us as well, just like I mean, I was there like always trying to convince myself, sort of like, okay, I mean, I was questioning what I'm doing, of course, like, I mean, does it make any sense?
Questioning all my life's decisions.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, does it make any sense? But then, like, every now and then you need to get like validation to keep the faith alive, sort of. And this did that, and people loved it, and like, I think I can safely say that like the gravel fork, the initial gravel fork we did, the Grit fork, became like the best reviewed suspension you could get on a gravel bike, which was like super nice. And we were like, wow, okay, this is it. Then we just like went on to like to talk to like the bigger bike brands, the biggest bike brands in the industry, but only to like basically I realized that we wouldn't get anywhere there, basically, because that's a completely different animal, basically. When you have the big like mass like production companies, as we have like a better understanding for now, is that they are not gonna jeopardize their operations on like a startup company product, sort of.
Right.
For them, like stability is key, sort of. They need to like and they in a way. I guess you can also say that our patent was sort of like working against us almost at that point, because that meant that it was only us with this technology. And let's say if you're like one of the biggest bike companies in the world, you would never like wanna put yourself at our mercy. I mean, we hold the patent, and if we stop like delivering the force to you and you like marketed it on your bikes, and
if
we just like pull the
model
plug
around. Yeah, you don't want to like build your house on somebody else's land, right?
Exactly. And our fork is such a like, at that point, like it was polarizing and like attention grabbing. So whatever bike you put it on, it became a Lauf bike, basically, when you put our fork on it. I mean, it's like let's face it, I mean, most other bikes usually are fairly similar. Different logos, of course, there are differences in them, but I mean, when you put like this, like, pink elephant.
That's where the eye goes, right?
Yeah,
that's the only thing people are going to ask about and notice on the bike is the Lauf fork.
Exactly. So, and that didn't work really well for like the big brands. So we soon realized that we weren't gonna like get anywhere, sort of like above like these like boutique, like niche, like high-end companies in terms of like selling our forks to other brands.
Right. And I think the other challenge at the time too was like, being a nascent kind of category is the gravel bikes hadn't considered suspension when they were being designed. So there were really almost no bikes that had suspension corrected geometry. No, exactly. So no matter what you put it on, it was jacking the front end up, even if it was only, 10, 15 millimeters, but it could definitely affect the handling.
It did, absolutely. Bottom bracket it became high and all that. So it was just like, it always messed up with geometry, just like, it was different between bikes, like how much. So we had that struggle like with the geometry to make that work. And then we had like the issue of like just the interfaces, like we wanted to make a fork that was like 1.5 inch steer at the bottom, like the widest you go basically, because it's so much better than like what many other brands were doing at that time. They were doing like 1.25, like so narrower steer at the bottom. But for carbon fiber, that's just like, it just makes no sense. Just like the fibers, it's so hard for the fibers to run up to a steer. So you have to like do so much carbon fiber there to make it strong enough, sort of. So it's not a good shape. So, but we were forced to do this like worse shape on the Grit because so many bikes were using that narrower like head tube. So we were like conforming to their sort of like, or trying to conform to their, while like, I mean, we know where this is going to lead.
But at the meantime, like the bottom was coming over from your mountain bike, and I think the original ones use a 15 millimeter through axle, and at the time, we were trying to get like 12 mil through axle because you were it was this weird crossover period where there weren't a lot of through axles for road yet, which meant there weren't many for cross or gravel, and the ones that were trying to figure out the axle standards. There's just
so a lot it was a mess. It's like but it's a fun mess. Like that's that's also a part of it. Like in gravel, the rule book hadn't been written already, so people were open. People's minds were open. It's like, hey, we have this new kind of riding. Hey, maybe this new fork is the right tool for the job. But I like on something that is like more conservative, let's say road riding, people are going to say like, hey, I mean, we've been riding road bikes for like this many decades. Like, why hasn't anyone like come up with this before? It can't make sense. But on gravel bikes, people were like open to the idea. But you had like this mess of like different standards, different approach from different brands and all that. And how, I mean, were we gonna make like 3 different versions of our fork to fit everyone's need or whatever? And then we like, looking into that. And then at the same time, realizing volumes would never be like high enough and all that. Then we're like, okay, screw them all, sort of like, let's, can I say it? Yeah. So yeah, screw them all. Let's just like, we know how we want a gravel bike to be, to like work perfectly like with our forks. We've tried so many different bikes with our forks and we're like, okay, we know this is good, this is good, this is good, this is not, all that. So we're like, okay, let's just make a bike ourselves, because like whatever like bike you put our gravel fork on, it becomes a Lauf bike already, sort of. So, I mean, and now we have sort of like the experience. So sort of, when you think about it, it's like it didn't take us long to develop like our True Grit, the first gravel bike we made, in a way.
Because you'd already been looking at so many bikes.
Exactly, because we had been working on it like unknowingly. Unknowingly, we had been working on it for so long, because like we had been looking at like comparing all the different bikes that we were fitting the fork on.
So you had this huge data set.
Yeah, so we had that.
And just didn't know what you were going to do.
And then we had like the perfect vendor, because like, and at that time, we knew actually like how to make a good bike. Sort of like we knew like how like the manufacturing methods would play into like the loads and all that. So we just realized, hey, yeah, I mean, yeah, we didn't realize at the time, but we have been developing like a gravel bike like for a year now already, sort of. So we just like formally started that project and then went on to make our own gravel bike.
You'd be fools not to, right?
Sort of at that point, yeah. But there was like, it was one of those like moments where we were like, okay, this is not really working. Let's go even like deeper in. Let's go let's put even more
double
chips.
down.
Yeah, let's double down.
There we go.
Like,
put it all on bike.
Yeah. Again and again and again. And then sort of like, of course, that means that we aren't like selling, like we aren't continuing to sell bike forks to other brands, because then, I mean, then they're like become like competitors. So they're not anxious to buy this bike fork from
another bike brand.
Yeah. So that doesn't really work. So we're jeopardizing like the little we had, but like our like gamble was sort of like, okay, we're picturing that to like lead nowhere anyway, sort of. So we had to like double down.
Yeah, a couple thousand units a year, maybe.
Which would never like be enough to like support the company, basically. Right. So we just like, on to the next one, which was like, a gravel bike.
Just like that.
Yeah.
So you had the patents on a product that was perfect for gravel. You had all the data to create the perfect gravel bike, and you had the manufacturing capabilities in-house. So why not become a gravel bike? So or a gravel company. Next episode, we'll talk about how that came to be.
Yeah, like how hard can that be?
Yeah, easy, right? Let's just make a bike.
Yeah.